cope with humanitarian crises and tide over humanitarian difficulties. Thank you, President.
I thank the distinguished representative of China. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Colombia.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We are grateful to the facilitators of the resolutions presented today for their hard work, and we thank them for their efforts to bolster the humanitarian assistance system and to keep the mandates relevant. That is necessary today more than ever. Colombia recognizes in the area of humanitarian assistance the principle of solidarity and cooperation in supporting affected countries who were impacted by emergency situations, and countries which require coordinated, organized, and effective response in times of crises. In our view, these efforts must be done in strict compliance with humanitarian principles, respecting the key role which the affected state must play, acknowledging that state's basic rights and to rapid, safe, and unfettered access to humanitarian assistance, and to protect the humanitarian personnel who are working in the most hostile environments and who bring hope to the civilian population in a situation of crisis. The most clear example we have is the situation in Gaza. UNRWA deserves the full support we can provide in defending its activities, which are vital for the Palestinian people. Not only have we co-sponsored the Security Council Resolution 2730 put forward by Switzerland to protect humanitarian workers, but we also joined within UNGA High-Level Week a ministerial group to protect humanitarian personnel headed by Australia. The purpose of it is to defend international humanitarian law and to promote action to protect humanitarian personnel in conflict zones. Mr. President, Colombia is a country which is highly vulnerable to the impact of climate change and extreme weather events such as El Niño and La Niña. They have become increasingly more frequent, and we are constantly facing emergency situations. Moreover, these phenomena disproportionately impact vulnerable populations: women, girls and boys, persons with disabilities, displaced persons and migrants, indigenous peoples, Afro-descendant peoples, and peasant communities. In our experience, these types of emergencies, which are aggravated by inequality, poverty, and exclusion, have a considerable impact in developing countries which must respond to the needs of their people in a short period of time. This is a considerable challenge for our countries in fiscal, economic terms, and in terms of our own capacity. Colombia has benefited from solidarity in the international community at a time of emergency, and thanks to that, we now have experience which enables us to make our abilities, our skills available to other countries, both in terms of emergency response as well as in providing South-South cooperation. We are fully aware of the fact that these efforts are not sufficient. The alarming increase in the number of conflicts, in violence, and in humanitarian emergencies and disasters caused by the triple environmental crisis has led to terrible consequences for humanity and for our ecosystems. For that reason, Mr. President, Colombia believes that we must create conditions which allow for the development of response mechanisms and early action, and we must successfully implement recovery strategies using a comprehensive approach so that we can build response plans and planning in the long term and contribute to greater resilience in the affected communities. We also need to consolidate our peace-building efforts and in this way facilitate the population's access to human security. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Colombia. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Switzerland.
Excellence,
Excellency, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. Devastating conflicts are on the rise. Geopolitical tensions are getting worse, and human suffering no longer seems to have any limits. In the Middle East, in Sudan, in Ukraine, in Myanmar, and in many other regions of the world, populations are being targeted by many intolerable direct attacks. They are being killed, wounded, displaced, arbitrarily detained. They are suffering sexual violence and dying of hunger. Just as shocking and unacceptable is the fact that humanitarian workers and UN personnel that tirelessly and courageously serve populations in need are being wounded, kidnapped and killed at an unprecedented rate. The majority of these victims are local employees. This situation is unparalleled in our recent history. We must all raise our voices for respect for international law, but also for humanitarian values, for the sake of greater humanity and greater solidarity. Ladies and gentlemen, in this alarming context, negotiations over the humanitarian resolutions are extremely important. They reflect the firm will of the international community to collectively overcome the colossal humanitarian challenges our world faces. Their consensus is the result of significant negotiations based on listening to and understanding one another and the pursuit of unity around humanitarian values and respect for international law. This must continue to be our priority. Ladies and gentlemen, here I would like to underscore three priority aspects for Switzerland. Firstly, in a world marked by growing armed conflicts, strict respect for human rights and international humanitarian law is vital, and it is the responsibility of all states. They must protect civilian populations, including humanitarian workers, and they must use their influence to uphold international law, to prosecute perpetrators and bring an end to this age of intolerable impunity. Secondly, under the Geneva Conventions, rapid, safe and unhindered humanitarian access must be authorized and facilitated by all parties to conflict. In crisis zones, this access is the sine qua non condition for the provision of essential aid. The political commitment of all member states is essential in order to put pressure on those actors that are hindering humanitarian access, including state actors and non-state armed groups. Third, in May, Switzerland introduced the draft resolution 2730, aiming to protect humanitarian and United Nations personnel, including national staff. Once again, Switzerland here would like to pay tribute to them for their bravery and determination to save and preserve the dignity of millions of lives, and calls for the complete and immediate implementation of the resolution. Ladies and gentlemen, in this terrible year of humanitarian crises, where needs are growing unendingly, a glimmer of hope was provided by the unanimous vote of the Security Council last Friday on the resolution renewing the humanitarian exemption to the 1267 UN sanctions regime. Switzerland had the honor of facilitating the resolution together with the United States. The standing exemption guarantees that humanitarian actors will continue to enjoy clarity and predictability to allow assistance to reach the most vulnerable people. This resolution concerns 10 of the most significant countries when it comes to humanitarian response, with around 100 million people in need. Switzerland's term on the Security Council is coming to an end at the end of this month. I can, however, assure you that Switzerland will continue its commitment to defending the right, principles, and humanitarian values in other UN bodies and on the ground where we operate. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Switzerland. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Yemen.
Thank you, Mr. President. We would like to thank the Secretary General for these important reports under this agenda item. They highlight the growing humanitarian challenges around the world. We are grateful to the facilitators of the draft resolutions that we have before us under this item. Mr. President, the Yemeni government expresses its support and total solidarity with the humanitarian community faced with the arbitrary measures and violations perpetrated by the Houthi terrorist militia in the regions under its control. The latest incident was the kidnapping and detention of dozens of UN staff members and the staff of international organizations, as well as local staff that are working in Yemen. The majority of them men and women who were forcefully removed from their homes after their homes were looted and their families terrorized. The fate of these people remains unknown, even though more than 120 days have passed since they disappeared. The Houthi militia entered the premises of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Sana'a. They confiscated property and they arrested 8 officials, 8 staff members, which is a direct threat to the lives of those staff members, the witnesses and the victims, in a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law. The people of the world, Mr. President, celebrate World Humanitarian Day at a time when the terrorist Houthi militia are continuing to perpetrate their crimes and their flagrant violations against the Yemeni people in the regions under their control, including humanitarian personnel. They are using torture and mistreatment as well as humiliation to force them into forced confessions, to then be able to convict some of them and sentence them to death. These crimes have been accompanied by propaganda and a disinformation campaign conducted by those militia. The Yemeni government reiterates its call upon the UN and the international community to intensify efforts to ensure the immediate unconditional release of all detainees and kidnapped persons and by prosecuting the perpetrators of those crimes. We must not turn a blind eye to the actions of the Houthi militia that are trying to serve their own interests and political designs and to put humanitarian assistance in the service of their military objectives. Faced with these ongoing violations and limits to humanitarian access, the Yemeni government reiterates its call for the primarily headquarters of United Nations agencies and international organizations to be moved to the temporary capital of Aden to ensure the safety and security of humanitarian personnel and to allow them to carry out their functions far from any interference in order to promote their presence and their humanitarian intervention in the various different provinces of Yemen without hindrance, in order to deliver humanitarian assistance to the groups that need it most in Yemen. Many provinces of Yemen this year witnessed floods and landslides which caused considerable damage to infrastructure and devastated public
Would everyone please take your seats? Please take your seats. The program will soon begin. Please welcome to the stage White House Domestic Policy Advisor Neera Tanden.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing? How was lunch? Excellent, excellent. As just announced, I'm Neera Tanden. I'm the President's Domestic Policy Advisor, and I have the profound honor to co-chair the White House Council on Native American Affairs. I co-chair that with Secretary Haaland, who is a phenomenal leader. Let's give her a round of applause, shall we? And through that work, I've had the privilege to witness firsthand the transformative power of this administration's partnership, and I really want to emphasize partnership with tribal nations. We're incredibly grateful for all the work we've done together to strengthen the nation-to-nation relationship. A central priority for this president, for this administration, for this vice president, and really at the heart of our work is the notion of respect. The president will talk a little bit more about this this afternoon, but I just want to say that when he took office, he made a simple promise to honor the solemn trust and treaty responsibilities of the United States, and that those treaty responsibilities with tribal nations. He declared the administration's unwavering commitment to tribal sovereignty, self-determination, and self-governance, not just in words, but through transformative actions. And I'm really proud of the executive order we announced last year, Executive Order 14112, which was designed to breathe life into those words. It was designed to meet the unmet needs we've seen in the past, but truly put respect in the relationship by ensuring that our agencies, our programs, put tribal nations in the driver's seat. And I've been proud to work with tribes all across the country as they work with agencies, pressure agencies, push agencies to fundamentally live the words of Section EO 14112. Because we know that when tribal nations are in charge, when they have fewer bureaucratic hurdles, when they're able to implement programs with fewer strings, they understand, you as leaders understand the needs of your people best. And that is the fundamental principle behind Executive Order 14112. And I'm pleased that we have transformed many of the projects of the federal government, but it will take your leadership, your continued leadership, to ensure that every corner of the federal government is addressing these concerns. And I also just want to say that in my tenure as chair of the Domestic Policy Council, I have had the great privilege to travel the country, and I've made several visits to tribes that are focused on native languages. And I am pleased to have been part of the White House team that worked on the President's federal boarding school policy, and was pleased to be part of the announcement of his apology. And as he said at that event, that the truth must be told and the truth must be heard. I think the President will talk a little bit more about this, but one of the real tragedies of the Indian boarding school era, the federal Indian boarding school era, was the eradication, the deliberate eradication of the culture of our tribes, and really making it impossible for children to know who they were and where they come from. Over the last hundreds of years, there have been over 300 native languages that have flourished across the country. Today, only 190 remain, and according to experts, only 20 will remain by 2050 without concerted action. I visited a tribe, the Pueblo tribe. We're in Santa Clara, and I learned that native language revitalization, I learned of real strategies there. I was really lucky to visit a school, Carpo Community School, where they were really ensuring children were immersed in the Tewa language. So from kindergarten through 6th grade, students were learning both in English and Tewa. And I saw the bridge that led to their understanding of their culture from learning that language. And that's why I'm so proud of the work this administration is doing to ensure that we don't lose native languages going forward. The President will talk more about this in the afternoon, but we see this as the federal government's role in righting the wrongs of our past, that the federal government took actions to really not just traumatize, but ensure that native cultures were eradicated. And it is our role and responsibility to ensure that we build back that culture, that we provide education, that we have a full spectrum, a full strategy to ensure that we never again take these kinds of actions. So I'm really proud to be part of an administration that is not just investing in Native communities and ensuring that Native communities are getting the level of support and autonomy they need to deliver, but I'm proud of being of an administration that is not scared to right the wrongs of the past, to acknowledge our true history, because it is our actual history, and to correct those wrongs that need to be corrected for justice to prevail. Thank you all very much.
Please welcome to the stage Director of the White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs, Tom Perez.
Good afternoon, everyone. Oh my goodness, it's such an honor to be here around so many friends. Thank you so much for coming today. I'm Tom Perez, and I have the privilege of serving as the head of our Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. In that capacity, I work for Rose Petoskey, okay? And I want to give it up for all the wonderful people. There's Rose, there's Morgan Rodman, who works with NERA. There's Rudy Soto over at USDA. There's Brian Newland, our incredible Assistant Secretary. And of course, there you are, Brian. Thank you so much for what you do. And of course, nuestro héroe, Secretary Haaland, thank you for being you. I I want to quickly, there's one person, if I could take the liberty of seeing if he is here and if he could stand up, because he is truly one of my heroes, and that is Oren Lyons. Oren, are you here today? I was told you were. And if you are, could you stand? There he is, Oren in the back. Oren Lyons and I are going to go to Los Angeles in 2028, when you will be with the Haudenosaunee Confederacy carrying the flag for the Summer Olympics in lacrosse. Thank you, Oren, for what you do day in and day out. You know, moments like today, I can't help but be wistful, and I reflect on where we were, where we've come, and where we still need to go. You know, back in the 90s when I had hair and no replacement parts, I worked at the Justice Department. I remember 1995. That was a seminal year because that's when we established the Office of Tribal Justice at the Department of Justice. 2010, that office was made permanent as a result of an act of Congress that you all were so involved in. And 2009 is when we passed a hate crimes bill. And when I led the Civil Rights Division, we brought our first case under that bill, and which enabled us to vindicate the rights of a member of the Navajo Nation who was savagely beaten because he was Native American. We've made real progress, folks. And now we think about 2010 as well. That was the year of our first Tribal Nation Summit in St. Paul. And I remember the former Attorney General Eric Holder attending that. And every year, it's about making sure we're doing more, making sure we're doing better, making sure we're doing everything in partnership. And now I look at what we've been able to do over the last 4 years. Neera and I were just with President Biden. He is so excited to be coming here soon so that we can again celebrate the remarkable partnership. There is no president or vice president that has done more for Indian country than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And we are proud of that. We're proud of that partnership, and we're going to keep it up. And I'm so appreciative of all the visits I had the privilege of taking, whether it was to the Osage Nation in Oklahoma, whether it was to so many tribal leaders in Arizona. And for me, the one that will always be most memorable was, again, the trip this past October with so many of you to, again, as Neera pointed out, to make the apology that was only about 100 years overdue. And the president will again talk about that more today. But what I think we need to focus on now, focusing on the future. You have set the last 4 years, we have set a high bar together. And this should be the floor, not the ceiling of what you demand moving forward. The partnerships that we have built are partnerships that should be and will be enduring because of all of the work that you have done and all of the foundation that Secretary Haaland, President Biden, Vice President Harris, and so many dedicated career and non-career professionals who are working throughout government. This is a moment of remarkable progress, but let's make sure that this moment is the floor and not the ceiling. The most important dependent clause in the English language is "we the people," in order to form a more perfect union. Our union, as you know better than just about everyone, was imperfect at its inception. We have made progress in the last 4 years, but we all know that more work lies ahead. Let's continue to do that work. Let's continue to do it in earnest. Let's take advantage of the foundations that have been laid here, and vamos a trabajar juntos. Working together, we will continue this progress. Thank you so much. The President and the Vice President look forward to speaking to you very shortly. Have a wonderful day.
Please remain in your seats. We will take a short break as we change the stage. Please welcome Sophia Madrigal.
Miahue, Achima, Buju, hello. My relatives, elders, and tribal leaders. My name is Sophia Madrigal, and I'm an enrolled member of the Cahuilla Band of Indians and am of Turtle Mountain Chippewa descent. Through my father's work, revitalizing the Cahuilla bird songs, I inherited a respect for our traditions and stories, but also an understanding of the responsibility that comes with them. Currently, I am a junior at Harvard University and serve as a California Native Youth Gen I ambassador. Standing before you today, I am filled with gratitude, as my ability to be here today is because of the work of so many of you, who I someday hope to embody. As an Indigenous girl, I know all too well that Indigenous women experience violence at rates 10 times higher than the national average. And since the age of 14, I have performed in the original Cahuilla play, Menyel in Her Heart, written by my sister, which addresses the devastating epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women and Two-Spirit people. Since our first performance, where over 100 people crammed into a gathering hall to watch us perform, Menyel in Her Heart has been performed up and down the state of California over 14 times, including for the California State Capitol in 2022, where we performed for members of the legislature in an event that accumulated in $12 million of program funding to address the issue. Every time I perform, I am reminded of those who did not get to grow old. And it is for my friends back home who shared the same dreams as me growing up, but who will not get to live them. This past summer, I worked in Assemblymember James Ramos's office, where Ramos was instrumental in passing the Luke Madrigal Act, AB 2018, named in honor of my father and his work, which aimed to protect Native youth in foster care system who are most susceptible to this crisis of MMIP. Now I have the honor of introducing Vice President Kamala Harris. Throughout her career, Vice President Harris has always been a dedicated advocate for the Indian Child Welfare Act. When she was Attorney General of California, she created the Bureau of Children's Justice, which worked on ICWA cases, work she has continued during her time as Vice President. Over her career, Vice President Harris has shown a dedication to protecting Native families for generations to come, and who has pledged a strong commitment to uplifting our nation's trust and treaty responsibilities to tribal nations, work that advances our self-determination and sovereignty. So it is my profound honor to introduce Vice President Kamala Harris.
Good afternoon. Can we please applaud Sophia? This is why we know the future is bright, right? Please have a seat. Please have a seat. Well, I want to thank everyone for your leadership, for your long-standing friendship, and for the work we have yet to do together. Let me say it is so good to be with Secretary Deb Haaland, who has been an incredible leader, as we know, and such a powerful fighter, and a dear friend and colleague to me. So I thank you, Deb, for all that you do. And to all the leaders who are here today, including all the leaders from California who I've worked with over the years on so many important issues, from protecting the rights of Native children to fighting for the safety of Indigenous women to conserving Native land. And I believe, of course, that the bonds between our nations are sacred. They are sacred. And that the federal government has a duty to safeguard and strengthen those bonds. A duty to honor tribal sovereignty, to ensure tribal self-determination, and to uphold our trust and treaty obligations. And I will always fight to build a future of opportunity and dignity for all Native people and all Native communities. As Vice President, I have had the honor to meet and work with thousands of Native leaders, from young leaders at our extraordinary tribal colleges and universities, to advocates fighting to protect Native votes and voting rights, to union workers in Arizona and Native small business owners from across the country. And here's what I know to be true. Native communities are home to some of the most innovative, skilled, and determined people in America. And as we all know well, there is an extraordinary amount of ambition, aspiration, and ability across Indian country. However, what is often lacking is the opportunity to pursue that ambition, aspiration, and ability. For far too long, the federal government has underinvested in Native communities, underinvested in Native entrepreneurs and small businesses, and underinvested in Native hospitals, schools, and infrastructure, which is why, over the past 4 years, we have made it a central priority, and it will remain a central priority to address these historic inequities and to create opportunity in every Native community. Take, for example, our work with Native small business owners. We know that one of the biggest hurdles to Native entrepreneurs is having access to capital. It's one of the biggest challenges. It's not for lack of a good idea, for serious work ethic, for a plan that actually would benefit the community and meet a demand, but it's access to capital. On tribal land and in many rural areas, the nearest bank is sometimes more than 100 miles away, making it more difficult for folks to get the resources and support that they need to start and grow a small business, which is why I have worked to expand access to capital since I served in the United States Senate, and as Vice President have made sure we invested over $1 billion in Native community banks, banks run by people who live in the community and understand and are in the best position then to understand the needs of the community, the capacity of the community, in a way that in particular other banks may not. And the impact of that approach is profound. As just one example, soon after taking office, I spoke with Anna Lebeau, a member of the Omaha tribe, and we had an extensive conversation. I reached out to her, and she understood that basically as an executive director of a Native community bank in South Dakota, that the entrepreneurs in the community, many of them just were not being recognized by those who could invest in their work and in their growth. We talked, for example, about entrepreneurs in the community who make traditional quilts and the challenges that they often face in securing loans, as big banks often don't fully understand the culture and therefore don't understand the value of the product or service, don't understand the demand, don't understand the need, just don't understand the culture. But community banks do. And today, Native community banks are using the $1 billion that we have given them to support Native entrepreneurs, to create jobs, and to generate economic opportunity across Indian country. In Native communities, we have also addressed inequities in healthcare, which we know is a long-standing issue. And we have done it with a belief, and I strongly believe, access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. That this is a matter and that this is a matter simply about dignity, about allowing people.
Earlier this morning in Altoona, Pennsylvania, members of the Altoona Police Department arrested Luigi Mangione, a 26-year-old male, on firearms charges. At this time, he is believed to be our person of interest in the brazen targeted murder of Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, last Wednesday in Midtown Manhattan. The suspect was in a McDonald's and was recognized by an employee